And you mentioned kind of leadership on this issue and the fact that the military are maybe pushing the agenda in some ways in the US. Isn't one of the problems is that Obama and the US administration is kind of hobbled here because of the political system and the way that your governance is set up, whereas in China you say they're coming to a 5-year plan, and if this decision is made at the top, then you can be sure it's going to happen, and it's probably going to happen on an absolutely immense scale. I know that you've got a lot of experience here in China, Barbara, so like what should we expect, and does their political system leave them at kind of an advantage in a way in this sense?
Well, yes, in a way. The Chinese government at the national level does have the ability to act decisively and with one voice when it develops these 5-year plans. I would add to that, however, that it is not a monolithic government. There are strong voices on every side of every issue within China. We don't necessarily see that. But for example, there's many strong, large fossil fuel companies in China, and in fact they're semi-governmental. The heads of these companies, the oil companies, the coal companies, they're at the vice minister level, so they have a very strong voice behind the scenes, just like in the U.S. But nonetheless, when the 5-year plan comes out, it does become the law of the land. The Congress pretty much will ratify it without much debate. But I think the difficulty in China has always been implementation of these ambitious goals, whatever they may be, at the provincial and local level. There's a saying in China that the mountain is high and the emperor is far away. So the further away these provinces are from Beijing, the more difficult it is for the central government to exert the necessary control and oversight to make sure that these policies are carried out.
Okay. I'm just going to remind our viewers that we're coming to you live from the United Nations Climate Conference here in Tianjin, China. We've had some questions coming in from people watching, and somebody mentions here cap and trade is the way for government to profit from the green revolution. But it doesn't solve the problem. Is that like a reasonable analysis of it? What kind of what scope is there for solutions like cap and trade to boost technologies like this?
Well, I mean, cap and trade has a long history, if you want to put it in those terms. And the point is that it was introduced into these negotiations by the United States in the middle of the 90s as a preferable way for allowing the private sector to make its own decisions about how to invest in order to achieve the same result. I mean, I don't know how, well, governments, I suppose, could profit out of a cap and trade scheme, and if you assume that there is corruption inherent in any government system, then of course they will profit from whatever they do. But in Europe, for instance, the European emissions trading system, after a few fits and starts, is now starting to be actually quite effective in terms of facilitating investment in renewable energy but overall in achieving its goal of reducing emissions. It doesn't in and of itself solve the problem. What solves the problem is the government setting a cap and saying your emissions are this, they will go down to this. Now you can achieve that through regulation, or you can achieve it through trading, you can achieve it through taxes, you can achieve it through a wide variety of means. But the judge on whether it's effective is whether or not emissions go down. It has been the economic argument for the past decade or so that using an emissions trading scheme is the most effective means of doing this economically. There's evidence to support that, there's evidence to contradict that on the basis of the experience mostly within Europe over the course of the last 4 or 5 years now that the European emissions trading scheme has been in place. But it's a tool. It can be used well, it can be used badly, and if it's set up properly, I think it can work quite well. I was at an event yesterday afternoon here in Tianjin, where there's an explosion of different assortments of types of carbon exchanges being established here in China on an experimental basis, which I think they seek to look at how they might use trading mechanisms to help achieve the Chinese government goal of a reduction of emission intensity, so-called, of 40 to 45% by 2020, which is what the pledge the Chinese government made in Copenhagen. And maybe it'll work better here in China than it does in Europe, because they are nothing if not traders.
And Doesn't it, the kind of this kind of question, and you say maybe there's a kind of degree of cynicism in it if you presume a corruption within politics or within government, but doesn't that point towards quite a challenge that we face here, which is that we're dealing with two kind of sectors or two kind of parts of society which there's a lot of cynicism about, which is big business at the moment and banks and investment and politicians, and this is kind of where a lot of the solutions are kind of situated, it seems. What potential is there for people on the street to use renewable energies? Can you have kind of local or community-based solutions? Is there any hope of that taking off? I don't know. In China, is there a kind of, do you have communities using renewable power, or is it all top down from the government?
Well, China is the world leader in solar water heaters, and it captures about 60% of the world market. You can go anywhere, all over China, and you will see solar panels on these traditional Chinese homes. People realize at this point that it costs about the same to purchase a solar water heater as it does to purchase one that is traditional, but it has no operating costs.
Right.
So, China's people are absolutely using these technologies right now when the costs work out. And there is, it's just amazing to see the level of innovation that's going on all throughout the country. There is an entire city about 2 hours outside of Beijing called Dezhou. It's called a solar city. And it just hosted the International World Solar Conference last month. This is a pinnacle of innovation, and we bring experts from the United States there who said they've never seen anything like it. Just people are having fun with it, developing solar looking trees and flowers, and they're trying to incorporate. When we drove here from Beijing, there were solar panels on the street lights. They're popping up every area of society.
And are we seeing this in the US as well?
I don't live in the U.S., but certainly there are communities who have invested in, everything from local biomass fuel creation to mini grids with small-scale wind and solar panels in rural parts of the area. It's very prevalent in Northern Europe.
It's in the UK. There's a movement called Transition Towns, which are working really hard to kind of look towards these community-based solutions and renewable energy at that level. So,
the nice thing, what sometimes makes it complicated with renewable energy, is that every individual location you will have a different mix of resources, potential applications of technology, and uses. And you have a wide variety of technologies and behavioral patterns that need to mix together in a way that can help meet the energy needs of any individual community, and every single one will be different. So on the one hand, if local communities want to become actively involved in this question, then there is a sometimes bewildering array of options available to them, but there will be a technology package that they can put together which will help meet their needs, or meet all of their needs, depending on how aggressive they want to be. The opportunities for people to become involved are endless, and people are not only doing it in their own communities but making a business out of that increasingly in places like, for instance, in Denmark, there's a couple of islands near the coast of Germany which have become 100% renewable energy islands, and that all of their electricity, heat, and transport needs are met through renewable energy. And I don't need to tell you that Denmark is not a very sunny place. There is some sun, but there's a lot of biomass and a lot of wind, and they mix it together and store it and use it in some very, very creative ways, and have actually developed some new technologies or technological management options which may have much, much wider applications, and some of those are starting to be marketed around the place as examples for other communities to pick up.
And I'd also like to mention something we haven't covered today, which is energy efficiency, because that really should be viewed, and we do view it, as the cheapest and cleanest and fastest source of energy that there is. And in fact, the cost is actually not a cost, but a net benefit, in that it results in lower electricity costs. And the studies have shown that the most effective programs worldwide to cut carbon emissions are in fact reducing energy use in Chinese industry, factories and buildings.
Wow, okay.
And interestingly enough, China is just near the end of its first major energy efficiency drive over the last 5 years. And they have required every province, every governor, every leader of all the big companies to reduce their energy use. And the job performance of these local leaders is going to be rated at the end of this year, in large part by how well they achieve those targets. So we're seeing an enormous focus on becoming more efficient in every aspect of society. NRDC, my organization, has been conducting training programs on this for the last several years, and we have people coming in from every province in China saying, we understand why efficiency is important. Please help us figure out how to achieve it.
Okay. I just want to come back to this island that's 100% renewable. That's a pretty impressive figure. Is that a realistic goal for countries like China? If you have a small island off Denmark, it's one thing. A country of a billion people seems like a bit more challenging. And we often hear this term, the energy mix, and people say, oh well, you need to have coal or you need to have oil. Is that inevitable? Are we always going to have some kind of fossil fuel-based solution, or when that runs out, some kind of nuclear-based solution?
Well, we're not. Ultimately, yes, because the world will run out of oil, the world will run out of coal, the world will run out of gas, and the world will run out of uranium. I mean, assuming that human civilization has a longer prospect than 200, 300, 400 years, then we will all have to get there eventually. Mm-hmm. That's inevitable, and that's indisputable. The question is how quickly we do it and what the consequences for the climate and the world's biosphere, the ecosphere, is in the process. Is it technically possible? Yes. I mean, just to take wind energy, the net technically exploitable resource on the land surface of the planet is somewhere between 7 and 15 times our total energy consumption. Okay. Is that a practical matter? No. And solar is 40 or 50 times the total energy consumption of the planet at the moment. And is it going to be all solar? No. It's going to be a mix of different technologies. And also in the time, could we eliminate all need for fossil fuels in the next decade? No. Mm-hmm. In the next 2 decades, well, probably not all of it. But before 2050, could we? Yes. Technologically and economically, I don't think there's any question about that. Do we have the political will to do that? That's a completely different question.
And in China, with a country of 1 billion people, 200 million, or more than 1 billion maybe, 200 million still on less than $1.1 a day, just or around $1 a day. Mm-hmm. That seems like a big ask, this kind of investment in renewable energies. What are their targets and hopes here?
Mm-hmm. China hopes to bring down eventually its reliance on coal. Mm-hmm. And in fact, studies by its own energy experts indicate that probably coal use is going to start leveling off in the next decade. Okay. And China is increasingly trying to diversify its energy mix. It keeps having to raise its targets for wind and solar and biomass because it's achieving them much faster than it had identified before. There's still a very small percentage of the total mix. Hydro is a big piece also, but they're determined to get there. Mm-hmm. And I think they will. And again, it's not, when you talk about the cost, we have to keep in mind the heavy cost of coal on China's own economy. Mm-hmm. Some say it's, the air pollution, the water pollution, the cost of human health is something like, 8% of its total GDP per year. Well, that's about equal to its economic growth. Okay. So it's coming out, flat if you do consider that true cost of coal. And
you can believe that having come to Tianjin as well. The fact that you can see the smog inside the convention centre in some of these big rooms is unbelievable. Okay, we're just going to wrap up in the next minute and a half. But the question I want to finish on very, very briefly is if we kind of pursue this really kind of vigorous renewable energy plan, what kind of world are we looking at in 20, 50 years? What's going to be different from today?
I think we will look back with nostalgia at the notion that somebody used to actually burn gasoline in order to drive a car. I think we will have our good energy services be supplied in a much greater percentage by electricity than they are at the moment in terms of both heating and particularly in transport. I think that efficiency will become a fundamental aspect of the development of any single product or service from the design stages, much, much more so than it is today. And I think we'll save an awful lot of money respiratory related illnesses and early deaths.
Maybe that's an interesting thought to leave it on. It's certainly got me thinking about what the future could be like if we get our energy behind this. So I'll just finish by saying, Barbara, thanks very much for joining us. I know you have to rush off to a press conference, and Steve also, thanks for your interview. We'll be on air at the same time tomorrow, so I hope you'll join us then. Thanks very much.